since you are here, I believe that you are deeply interested in personal growth, and that's why I assume that you will love today's episode, because today I am joined by ex-teacher, now a master life coach and IFS practitioner, Andrea Tessier. Did I pronounce your surname correct? Okay. Great. So hi, Andrea. How are you?
Hi, I am great. Thank you so much for having me. And hi to all of your listeners. And thank you for tuning in English today. I'm so happy.
Yeah, from time to time we have an English episode. So I know that these episodes are listened to. So yeah, we'll see. But it's great from the perspective that we are bringing now something new into however this podcast, because we never had parts work, we never had internal family system. We are talking quite a lot about different coaching tools, personal growth, and so on, but we never talked about IFS on this podcast. So I'm looking forward to this episode. And yeah, maybe we both were in Elementum. You were a faculty member when I was a student. And I have to mention, I didn't mention before when we were chatting, that your comments or feedbacks on immersion calls always really stayed with me, because you always had that, you always talked with passion and with such positive energy that it was really, really great to hear your feedback on immersion calls.
Thank you. I received that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I know you've probably told your story a lot of times, but I assume that many of those who are listening to this episode now don't know you yet. So please let us know, who are you? How did you fall on this path to become a coach? And I don't know, what mission are you on?
Yeah. Ooh, great questions. So we'll start with, like you said, Andrea Tessier, master life coach, IFS practitioner. That was not always the case. I actually had a teaching career. I was a successful teacher for 13 years. Most of that I taught internationally. So I was teaching at international schools. I was teaching abroad. I was working with kids from all over the world, traveling loads, and ended up moving back to Canada in 2017, which is where I live now. So born and raised Canadian. And I tried teaching for a couple years, but there was already something about it that wasn't aligned anymore. But like most people, I stayed too long, right? I stayed past the point of knowing that something wasn't right yet, because it was all that I knew. And so I spent about 2 years in this career that was so familiar to me, because it was all that I knew. And teaching is one of those things that just becomes such a part of your identity that it's really hard to totally let it go, until my last 2 years of teaching, and I completely burnt out. Like, it was awful. And I struggled with colleagues and administration. I was a hard time with the students. I didn't like the person that I was being. And being a great teacher was always such a pride point for me. And I didn't like the feeling of going to school every day. And I didn't like the person that I was being anymore. It was just like melting into all parts of my life. And I was just exhausted. I didn't know at the time that I was burnt out, but I totally was. And the most miraculous thing happened was on the last day of school, on my last day of teaching, I just left. Like, I didn't leave thinking I'm never going to be a teacher again, but I just left. Like, I was done. And that really scary leap ended up being the best thing that I ever did, because up until that point, my life had been directed by a school schedule. Right? My life had been directed, like when I could pee was determined by a school bell. When I could go on a holiday, it was determined by a school schedule. Like everything was predetermined for me. And then I had all of this freedom. And that was kind of scary. I was like, what do I do with this? Like, I don't have a plan for this. You know, we start asking kids what they want to do with their life when they're 5 years old. Right? And there's a very set trajectory, right? You go to school and then you go to university and then you get a job and then you die. Like that's the trajectory. And so I was like, oh shoot, like there isn't a map for this. What do I do now when I'm, the plan has ended? And I was like, okay, that didn't feel good. What does? And who do I need to be the person that chooses in alignment for the next stage? Because I didn't have the foresight for the next 25 years of my life. The most powerful decision I made at that point when I didn't know what to do with my life was to not decide and give myself the very radical permission just to see what I felt like doing every single day. One day. So I got into this habit of like waking up in the morning, asking myself, what do I want to do today? And I just did that. And so some days it was like, go to the beach. Some days it was go to the park. Some days it was like, go to a yoga class. Then one day it was like, get a dog. And then I was like, oh, okay. And then one day it was do your yoga teacher training. Another day it just brought me to different conversations. And it was like step by step, piece by piece, in a way that I could never have planned myself. The path started to emerge. I heard a life coach on a podcast and I was like, oh, I wonder if I could do that. Maybe I should hire that person. That's literally how I hired my first life coach. It was like, I heard somebody on a podcast and I was like, oh, maybe I should do that. And so I wouldn't say that coaching was like a thing that I aspired to do. It was very much something that I was guided to do when I got out of my own way, when I allowed life to move through me and show me the way rather than the other way around, which is what I was conditioned to do.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. I wanted to ask you, and then you went on and you told everything. But how scary it was to leave the job, the life that you knew without a plan, just to step out and
terrifying. And it was like this very tricky point of like hating the old life, being absolutely miserable, but familiar, and the possibility, the hope of what else it could be. Go ahead.
But you were asking yourself all the right questions. Who I need to become, and so.
I mean, there was, and we'll get into this when we talk internal family systems, there was enough like self energy there that I was able to drop into those bigger questions. And I am really grateful for that. Yeah.
That's a great story. And I think that a lot of us and those also who listen, and a lot of people are trapped in the same position because they don't know anything else that the thing that they were taught to and what they are doing now. And it's a scary leap to leave it all, because I built this, it's 20 years in this business. What happens if I leave?
Yeah.
Everything changes. Who am I then? That's my identity is I am this and this, and then I leave. Who am I then? It is scary.
It is terrifying. And in a way, there's this like giving up of the security for your freedom. And making that choice point between security or freedom is terrifying. We all say, yes, sure, I want to feel free, but at the expense of my security, ooh. And there's like a whole bunch of parts that come up around that.
Yeah, and then you can ask yourself, what actually is freedom? Because first you think, oh, freedom is I can be anywhere, I can travel, I can do all the things. And then you do this, and then you see maybe routine is the actual freedom. Maybe I have to be like wake up at 6, exercise. Maybe it's my routine is maybe my freedom. So people are different, but if we don't try, we don't know. So maybe we dream about freedom, which is actually not our freedom. It's a freedom that we saw somewhere else, and we think, oh, that's freedom, but
Yes.
maybe it's not.
So well said. And for me, freedom is a mix of both, right? It's the routine, and it's the freedom to be like, no, I don't choose the routine today. Right? And we'll talk about self-energy again. I think true freedom is like allowing yourself the permission to choose, realizing that you have the power to choose. And when we talk about self-energy, choice is, the ninth C of self, in my opinion, in my experience, because that's when we truly get to create lives that are extraordinary, out of the ordinary. Like if we want to choose a remarkable life, something that is brand new, that is not created on autopilot. That is not created from our conditioning. That is not created from what society would have us do. But choice gives us the opportunity to create truly extraordinary lives.
That's beautifully said. Mm-hmm. So let's jump into IFS. You're IFS practitioner. Let's begin at the beginning. So how would you describe IFS? What is IFS?
Oof, yes. Okay. So IFS stands for Internal Family Systems. It is a model founded by Dr. Richard Schwartz in the 80s, and it is growing in popularity and interest all over the world, because our favorite teachers are teaching about it now, which is incredible because it is evidence-based. It freaking works. So the idea of the model is that we are all made up of a system of parts. And you can think of parts like perhaps the last time you were invited to go to a party, right? Part of you wanted to go and part of you wanted to stay home, right? These like polarizations that run our life. And underneath those two polarizations, there was probably a part that felt guilty, a part that was like, well, I don't even know what to wear, a part that was like, can I leave the kids with the babysitter, that was afraid of being judged. And the idea is that normally we think, well, that's just thinking, right? That's just what my mind does. But internal family systems, we say like, no, actually, each one of those has an essence, a mind of its own, an intention, a feeling of its own, and it's designed to protect us in some way. And so the idea in internal family systems is the mind is naturally multiple. We have all of these parts inside that are driving how we think, how we feel, how we choose and do life all of the time. And we're generally just not aware of it. You might be aware of some of your parts. You're probably familiar with your perfectionist part, or your inner critic part, or your hypervigilant manager part, or your people-pleasing parts. Very, very common parts. And in internal family systems, we see all of these parts as valuable and wise and important to the running of how we function as a system. And so the idea is that we're not trying to like get rid of aspects of ourselves. A lot of people are like, oh, I just wish I wasn't perfectionist. I just wish I could get rid of my procrastination part. But in internal family systems, what we want to do is integrate these parts into our whole self, who we truly are.
That was my story 4 years ago. I created this podcast actually to overcome my perfectionist part, because I always, I don't know, I was always lost in trying to do things better before I could show it to the world. And then I saw I will create a podcast, and until this Friday I will have a host. Until Sunday I will have a name. And this was, I will get rid of my perfectionist. This was my plan. And yeah, of course everything was done, but that's not the point. Perfectionist is still there, but maybe not. It was not in this project. Maybe, I don't know, showed up somewhere else, but perfectionist is still there.
100%. And what I'm hearing you say, even in that example, which is perfect, there's the fact that you noticed this part within you, but there was the other part that wanted to get rid of the perfectionist. That other part, like, that's not you, right? It was another part that said, ooh, that perfectionist is bad and wrong. Let's get rid of it.
How we create these parts? How parts are in general created?
Yeah, so we're born with them. Parts are simply activated neural pathways from a nervous or a neuroscience perspective. And through life, some of them get activated and acted upon more than others. And so through events of our lives, like big T or small t trauma, they might develop to protect us from disappointment. They might keep us on track and get stuff done. Parts develop to protect us from really big feelings like shame, fear, humiliation. They also develop to help us feel good and soothe. Sometimes that shows up as like addictive parts. But the intention behind them is always pure. The intention behind them is never to hurt or to harm. They form during life circumstances when we didn't have a choice, right? Your perfectionism developed probably because you had to, right? Either you were rewarded for perfect things, you only got approval when things were done correctly. And we developed these systems of survival to maintain a sense of belonging and control and safety when we didn't feel that way.
It was good to be a good boy.
Yes. It was good to be a good boy, because the alternative to that was dangerous. Right? And when you're little and you don't have any control over your environment or your life, you have to mold yourself to who is around you. And if you can be a good boy, it's brilliant. Brilliant.
And it becomes a brilliant mechanism which keeps me safe.
Exactly. Until you create this life that is safe, but not expansive, but not remarkable. Until that same strategy that kept you safe, that same part that kept you safe, is not allowing you to expand into that extraordinary life that you know, right? Your essence knows you are capable of.
Yeah, you mentioned essence. Probably you're referring to the self.
Yeah.
One of the important things in IFS is to somehow bring the self into the awareness, or how to put it.
Yes, exactly. So self energy is like the crux of internal family systems. It is basically the essence of who we are. It's not a part. It is who you are when all of your parts can relax. It is the true you. So it's not something you need to go get. It's not something you need to do. It's not something you need to figure out. I like to think about self-energy like the sun behind the clouds. But even when the clouds are there, the sun is still there, right? The clouds will dissipate and the sun will come out. Like, it is always there. And so everybody has self-energy. It is just buried underneath different amounts of cloud cover. So you might notice yourself in self-energy. There are 8 indicators of self-energy, and I always forget them all. But there is when you're feeling like compassion, when you have a level of clarity, when you feel really calm, calm like you're standing in Walmart on Christmas Eve and you're totally relaxed. Self-energy is when you're like inherently courageous, when you feel connected to others around you and nature, and when you can feel in that creative flow. And then I've added on like the 9th C is really like choice. And most people have experienced moments of those in their life. The idea is that the self is not broken. Everybody can access it. But when we work with the parts can relax. And it allows this really beautiful opening for self-energy to emerge. And from that state, really, we can create lives that are truly meaningful and truly remarkable because we're not running from our conditioned parts.
But can it be confusing? Because if parts are running the show for so long, can you confuse when you're in the self and you may think that this is actually not the self? This is just a part who likes to enjoy, to be in peace.
It's very confusing, especially it's difficult for people who are in the work, who are like trying to get to self-energy. They're like, I just want to get to that state. That's not self-energy. Self-energy is not urgent. It doesn't have an agenda in the same way that our parts do. And so it can be a little bit difficult to discern because, and this is tricky for me still, we have parts that are very much like self and think that they're self. Like they're really good at putting on this self persona and this self mask. But if there's like an agenda or a uncertainty behind it, they can kind of masquerade. So discerning self and parts can be a little bit tricky at first, but the more you work with your parts, the more you like feel that essence and anchor it into your body, the easier it becomes. So there's this term in internal family systems we call blending. And blending is when we just feel like we are our parts, right? Like I'm anxious, I am anxiety. Like I am the anxious one, my worries are true, and this is really what's going on. But when there's enough self-energy there, we can unblend, which means there's room between me and the anxious part, right? I am no longer anxiety. There is an anxious part here. And there's a little bit of separation. I'm like, okay, I'm over here. I can also see the anxiety as an entity that exists, and it's not me. And that's actually what we're looking for, is a little bit of room just to unblend enough to be like, okay, there are parts here, but they're not me. And that's actually a really beautiful way to move into the work, not to expect to be in self-energy all of the time, but just to have enough space between you and the parts to be able to name and map who is here.
Space gives you freedom in this.
Yes.
It's the analogy of the conductor and the orchestra. So conductor has the space, orchestra is there, and yeah.
Yes. And I mean, like, even now, there is a lot, like I can feel there's a lot of self-energy here. I'm feeling very connected to you. I feel very connected to the listeners, even though we're recording this in the past. I feel very confident in how I'm speaking and sharing. None of this is scripted, which I would have done in the past. But I'm also aware of like, am I talking too much? there's a part that's doing that, right? Or like, how do I make sure everybody gets this? Like, so I'm aware that there are some parts here, but at the same time, there's this like critical mass of self energy also present.
Mm-hmm. I was wondering, because a lot of people are talking about IFS in a complete spiritual way. Like IFS is a spiritual framework. And then on the other hand, we have IFS like a part of the official psychotherapeutical work,
Yes.
which is well structured, and it's not really spiritual. So how do you perceive this?
Oh yeah, both, and which is why I'm obsessed with this model. Like I have a very analytical mind. I love psychology. I love nervous system work, and I'm also a deeply spiritual person. And that essence of self energy is what spiritual traditions have been talking about for thousands of years. And we've always been like, well, how do I get there? Well, IFS, the model gives you a way to access that energy that different religious and spiritual traditions have been talking about. And so it's both, which is great because it gives different people different entry points to the work. And so you feel it. When you are tapped into self energy, I am so intuitive. I am so clear, so connected. Like that is a very energetic and spiritual experience to be in. And it is also like very connected to like neuroplasticity and what is going on in the mind. And so there's a lot of different entry points to really understanding it. So both and.
Do you have any tips and tricks how to somehow reach this self energy? How to maybe step more into this self energy?
Yes. So to go deeper, we must soften first. So any experience of resistance, pushing, urgency is an opportunity to like let go of the wheel, take your foot off the gas, and just take a step back. Number one. And if we want to access these deeper points, we're not going to do it by more like jackhammering into our psyche. That's more of our like manager parts that are trying to get shit done rather than the softness holding of self energy. Also, where a lot of people in the work, I'm doing this with air quotes, get it wrong because they're like, no, I just want to get there. I want to be awakened. I want to be enlightened, and I'm going to do the fast track to get there. That's not self-energy.
I have 2 days to I have 2 days to reach that state.
2 days till enlightenment. Let's go. So number one, to go deeper, we must soften first. Number two, if you can start to speak about your experiences as parts, right? A part of me feels anxious. Part of me is scared about this launch. A part of me is really excited about this launch. A part of me wants to go to the party. A part of me really doesn't like that guy. Then that allows us to separate it because I guarantee it's not all of you. I guarantee that. And I just know that because I know I've worked with hundreds of people and that's always the case. It's a part. And the more that you can do that, that language is so empowering because it gives you space. It gives you space to see things from a little bit broader perspective where there's clarity. And that my third tip would be taking moments throughout the day, and we can do this right this second, where you just pause, put a hand on your heart, close down your eyes, and ask the very simple question, what part of me needs my attention right now? And that's it. See what comes through. You might notice that there is a part that's like, I'm really tired, or like, I'm worried that these people are judging me. Or am I getting this right? Or I don't really want to do the project that I've been putting off, right? What part of me needs my attention right now? Not to make it wrong, not to give it a reframe, but just enough room to say, okay, I get that. I'm available for you. I am aware that you are here, and I accept that. That's it. Like, that's a really beautiful entry point.
And it's so often so hard to put our foot off the gas. We all have that FOMO and everything, and we have to go, go, go. And yeah.
Same. Like, me too. And I've been a practitioner of this work for years. I've been receiving the magic and medicine of this work for longer than that. And even still, last week, I caught myself in the exact same pattern, trying to figure out this project in my own business that just wasn't working. So my workhorse parts were like, okay, let's dig right in. Let's figure this out. And my manager parts were just like searching for answers and trying to figure it out. And then I had firefighter parts that were like, dude, like, let's just sleep because this is too much. And thankfully, like, it took longer than I would want it to, but I did it. I was able to take my hands off the wheel, foot off the gas, give myself and my parts what they actually needed. There was parts that were scared. There were parts that were anxious. There were parts that are like, we're so confused. We don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, oh, I've been overriding all of those parts because I wanted to get shit done. And in those small moments, in the pause, I was able to start to integrate them. Right? I like to think of those scared, vulnerable parts as like toddlers, like 2 or 3 year olds. You would never tell a 2 or 3 year old, like, stop being so scared. That's stupid. You would go, oh, I'm sorry. That makes a lot of sense that you're scared right now. And you would give them a great big hug. And we get to do that internally.
You've mentioned different groups of parts. You've mentioned managers, firefighters. Can we address those parts in a way? Who are they? What's their point to be there?
Yes. So the categories don't actually matter. There's going to be personal development nerds here that are like, what's a manager? What's a firefighter? It doesn't freaking matter. But I will go into it because it is fascinating. So manager parts are parts of us that are really proactive. They are the proactive problem solvers in our system. They're the parts that get us to where we need to go on time. They're the ones that make sure we have groceries and never run out of toilet paper. These are the parts that make sure that we show up dressed and looking good and all of those things, like making sure we do life right. So we love our managers. Managers are the ones that get you to therapy and tell you when you're not, doing things as good as you could be. Like, these are our managers. They want to preserve you doing life right. And we love to love our managers, even in their extreme roles. Like, an inner critic is also a manager part. Right? They're managing the way that you're perceived to others. They're managing how you are navigating life. They're doing it in a way where they're kind of jerky about it, but that's what they're doing. Our perfectionists are managers. They're managing how we're perceived, the quality of our work so that we belong. And then the other category of parts are firefighters. Firefighters are the protectors we love to hate. They are the ones that are actually like balancing out the like efficiency and overdrive of our managers. So these are the ones that are going to soothe us and distract us when our managers are running the show. And they're also the ones that are protecting us from our exiles and our deepest wounding. We'll talk about exiles. But firefighters, we don't like them because a lot of the ways that they show up, addiction, binge eating, numbing out, shopping when you don't have the money, like the way that they show up to soothe us is not valuable or accepted by society. And so we shame our firefighters. Sweets.
Sweets.
Raise my hand there. I've got that one. Even like over exercising could be like a manager part. And then a firefighter is like, holy moly, that's way too much. We need to soothe this by like eating all of the ice cream in the container. Right? And so it ends up being that these managers and firefighters in our system are constantly in contradiction, creating a lot of internal chaos. But what they're actually both trying to do is protect our deepest wounding, what I just mentioned, those exiles, our most tender, our most vulnerable, our most scared parts that are hurt and we have been shaming and putting aside and hoping time will heal all wounds, and it doesn't. And so their managers and firefighters both have their own ways to protect us and these exiles, but they're doing it in a way that creates a lot of polarity inside, which feels very confusing. It feels overwhelming. And then when we're in that cycle for so long, we kind of check out, we numb out, we over medicate, or we just freeze and go numb or go into like a depressive state. Is like full system shut down. This is way too much.
Yeah. And as we mentioned, none of them are bad. None of them wants to harm. They are all no bad parts.
No bad parts.
The title of the book.
Yes, exactly. Dr. Richard Schwartz, and for anybody who's listening who's fascinated by this, that's a great entry point to this work, is Dr. Richard Schwartz's book, No Bad Parts. Yeah.
I just bought the book, didn't read it yet. I will.
That was a good one.
Great. So we have different categories of parts. We know that no part is bad part. We have ourself. We now have the tips and tricks how to reach ourselves. But we know all this. How it is? How to put all this all together in a harmony? So how do you help your clients to somehow make this orchestra play the harmony in a beautiful way?
Oh, so good. I really love my manager parts right now are loving how you're piecing this together. Setting this up. Yes. So my clients generally come to me because they are entrepreneurs, they are coaches, they have had that universal tap on the shoulder that has said, you need to do this work. You have a gift. We want you to be part of this mission on the planet. They've said yes to it. And because that is so stretchy and out of their comfort zone, all their parts come up and they procrastinate and they're afraid of being seen and they don't know how to do it. And they come to me because they realize they don't just have business problems, they have a personal problem in the way. And so I believe that everybody on this planet has a gift. And if you have the inspiration, I want you to be in the work. Because if we're all doing what we're meant to do, we'll be good. And so I have this inherent belief in my clients and their mission and their inspiration. And so to get them there, for that to naturally emerge, I want to support them in working with the parts that are in the way of getting them. And so it's a mishmash, it's a balance of like real world action to get them to where they want to be for their dreams to come true. And to do that, it's the deep inner work of internal family systems. What parts are in the way from you getting to that dream? And so the way that it works is a lot of times my clients will show up to a session to be like, okay, I'm in this pattern. This part is showing up for me. Can you help me like work with it? And a process is really interesting because up until now, you and I have had this very analytical conversation about it. The work itself, it's really hard to describe, but the best way I've learned to describe it is it's a little bit hypnotic. You're really tapping into a different phase of the psyche, more of like a liminal phase where you're tapped into a different part of the mind. This isn't talk therapy. This isn't more like action and goal setting. We're really dropping in deep to connect with one or a few of these parts. And we set it up almost like an interview. So you, the client, is sitting there having a real conversation with one of these parts. And so often, like you said, a whole bunch of parts will show up all at once. And that's where I get to use my gifts to help them map that out. But they're getting into deep dialogue. And it's like if you were going to have a conversation with a new person in your life and build a new relationship. We're leading with curiosity. We're listening. We're asking questions. We're not going, no, that's wrong. The way you see the world is stupid. We're going, hey, tell me more about that. When did you come online? Like, how long have you been helping me? What do you think is going to happen? What are you afraid will happen if you don't do this? And we're getting information directly from that part, that neural pathway. And most times they're less than 10 years old, these parts. Less than 20 for sure. Less than 20 or 25. But most of the time they're really young. And for some reason, that always elicits a lot of compassion in my clients or the person that's sitting there, because they're like, oh my God, of course. Well, that makes so much sense. I totally get why you would think that, because these parts in that state are kind of revealing these memories and things that happened that you know about already. It's generally not something shocking that you've never realized about yourself. But you go, oh my God, that was so much bigger than I thought it was. You know, like in that state, I've been taken back to like a math class in grade 5. I've been taken back to gym class in grade 7, like moments that were just awkward and cringy and humiliating. And I was able to go to my version of me at that time and give me what I needed. Safety and reassurance and availability.
And that's why this combination is so powerful. IFS and inner child work. And I know you do both.
Yes.
It's always somehow they're always somehow connected, both modalities.
Well, I mean, I actually see the inner child as an exile, or the exile as an inner child. And that's the way that it makes sense to me through the model.
Whenever I was coached and the beginning of the session went into IFS, and it always ended up with the inner child work. We were always doing inner child healing.
Yeah.
But I know something is obviously there, and it's screaming for attention, and I have to revisit the old me from time to time, or more often.
And what's really cool, like after these deep processes, people report feeling relief, like just tremendous relaxation, relief, understanding, clarity. They're no longer in like judgment over themselves and what they're doing. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. And there's like it profoundly healing, like something happens in that state through that magic and medicine of compassion and self-energy, that those pathways start to rewire. And over the next couple of days, my clients will report like new clarity will come in. Like clients will come to me being like, I can't make this decision in my business. I don't know what's going on here. We dive in, we unburden a baby part of them. 3 days later, they're like, okay, I wrote the program. I'm ready to my prices. Like, let's go. And I'm like, amazing. And it's really, really powerful in that way, you know?
That is a great feeling. To see someone who you tried to help, you helped, and to see the feedback, to actually receive the feedback.
Yes.
See the results.
It happens within days, and I love that. But also, I love to keep in touch with my clients like months after. You know, when you make a rapport with somebody and you walk life with them through the muck, you keep in touch, right? Like, at least for me, you do. That's important. And so my clients report months later going like, oh my gosh, I just went through like life was lifing. And because I have the tools, because we did that work, it was so much easier. Like, I'm talking about loss of parents, loss of jobs, like going through really rough times in life. And they're like, that was hard, but I had it. Like, I had me. And that to me, like, I get goosebumps just thinking about it, because that's what I want. The work isn't about like rainbows and fairy tales all the damn time. The work is that when life shows up, because it's going to, that we can meet it with calm and clarity and courage and trust that we've got that. And that's what this work opens up. And that's what I love it.
Great. I'm really glad that we somehow covered the IFS in general. We could go much deeper, but we are somehow reaching the end of our conversation. And since this podcast is in my native language, or in translation, it's called Success Theory. I ask every guest also what is his or her definition of success. So the same question goes also to you. So what is your definition of success?
Oof. I thought about that question so many times. I know you like to ask it. And it's very nuanced, because my get it right parts have the right answer to that question. It's beautiful and it's sparkly, and like all your guests have the right answer to that question. And our parts hold very different answers to that question. So I want to, like, now that we have that context, I just also want to name that truth, because I don't actually believe that success is a number in the bank account. It's not applause in a crowded room. It's, it's more about alignment, right? Do I feel aligned in my inner world? And is that aligned with my outer world? That feels true for my more visionary, awake, aware parts, right? And I still have parts deep inside that are really holding on to like legacy burdens around that, right? And a lot of people do, where success is tied to materialism and capitalism, because those are burdens that we were given, right? And so that is not what we choose from. And so it's almost like, okay, well, that's your definition of success. Great. But what success are you actually aligned with? That's a better question. And so, I do see success as like integrity and matching your inner and outer expression, of course. And in that integrity, I want to name that I have parts that still see success as style and status and money in the bank. And those are parts that we get to work with to integrate and update them to the definition that we truly want to choose. How's that?
So well said. And it's so in the context of this conversation. Great. Yeah. And as you mentioned, we are so many times chasing this ghost. We are chasing, I don't know, stuff, toys, money.
Yes.
And titles.
Yes.
And we're so many times then disappointed because we are empty. When we reach that goal, we maybe are happy for that 5 minutes, and then we are empty. And if success is not aligned with our true self.
Yes. And so the work is like, let's go to that part that's been burdened by that legacy burden of capitalism and materialism. Let's go to that part and help the part shift that. Not me. Like, I already released that, but the part hasn't yet, because those are so deeply ingrained that we're most of the time like, damn, that's still there.
Yeah, but it's normal, because from day zero, we see these things from our birth. So this is like as far as I can remember, it was important. The important people, the successful people, had money, had good cars, had big houses. So you think, this is success. So
Of course,
that's how it looks like.
Yes. And that's why in internal family systems, we call those legacy burdens. They're not even ones that we were necessarily involved in creating, but they were like downloaded into us just by being in the culture, society, family, communities that we grew up in. And we can unburden ourselves from those too.
Yeah, Great. We covered some ground in our conversation today, but is there anything that you would like to mention? Something that we didn't speak about, and you would like to share it with our audience?
Yeah, I think I just want to name to your listeners that if you're seeing yourself in some of these parts or any of this conversation, I just want to remind you, like, you're not broken. You're not doing life wrong. You're not, standing at the bottom of a mountain with an uphill battle. Your parts do genuinely want to trust you, and they genuinely love you and like you a lot, and are there to help and want to meet you when you are ready. And so if you're feeling that internal chaos or overwhelmed, that so many of us are, there's ways to work with your insides. And I can honestly say that nothing has to change for everything to be different when you're doing this work.
That is great.
Yes. So I might just offer, if this is like piqued anybody's interest, if you have parts that are leaning in, you can come check out my YouTube channel. It's a brand new baby YouTube channel. It's IFS and Inner Work with Andrea. We go deeper with the model. I'm working on doing some sample coaching sessions as well that you can check out there. There's also like guided processes and meditations so that you can actually drop into your system. So that's a great place to come and check it out and connect with me on Instagram. It's just the reverse of my name, Tessier, Andrea. And I'm always offering tips and tricks and tools, and you can send me a DM there.
And do you have any active programs now that people can join if...
Well, I'm doing right now, I'm only open for one-on-one coaching.
Okay.
And so there is a couple ways to do that, actually. So most people like to try an IFS session first. And so there is a way to do just a one-off, try it out session. It's called an IFS coaching experience, which is actually a really juicy way to dive into the work. We do a full session together. And then after the call, I'll go and write a whole roadmap for you where I'll actually unpack and map out all of your parts and give you some really specific next steps. So that's a great one too.
Yeah, so great. So to all of you listening and watching, check out Andrea. You heard everything will be linked also in show notes, so no excuses. You can find everything. Check out Andrea, and yeah, that's it. And before we end this conversation, you mentioned a beautiful question before, and we can leave our listeners with this question. If I got it right, the question was, what part of you might be needing your attention today? Was it like that?
Yeah. Part of me needs my attention, right?
Yeah. So let's leave our listeners with this question. Great. So Andrea, thank you for your time. Great to see you. Great to talk to you. All the best, and just stay so positive also in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.